Hello, 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 world. This is Louise Hicks, your host of Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. How is everybody today? And please subscribe, leave your comments, give it a like, thumbs up, because we have a very profound, interesting conversation to discuss today. And wherever you are, it could be evening when you're watching this. Again, Louise Hicks here, your host of Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. And we're going to talk about this $2 billion that supposedly is given to Black farmers. And in that discussion, I have a video to share with you. And this is going to be a two-part uh, episode. So we're going to get into it. I'm going to share with you my thoughts, but first, I want to share with you some thoughts from vickidillard. And a lot of you probably know her. So let's go and get right to it in part one of Black farmers, huge losses, political sabotage. That's what we're going to talk about. So let's get started. Let me share with you what vickidillard has to say, and I will chime in from time to time. Won't be too many interruptions because she's straight to the point, and you know she shoots from the hip. So let's listen to what Miss Vicky has to say. So here we go. And she has some profound factual information. So let's have it.
Peace, family. My name is vickidillard for African Diaspora News Channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to give the broadcast a big thumbs up, and share. That way other folks will know that we're here. It activates the algorithms to send out more notifications. And how many of you all know we need all the notifications we can get when we are representing topics and issues that matter to you. So thank you so very much, family. Listen. Of course, you all know we have been doing a whole lot of coverage concerning the upcoming elections here in the United States. And that's so important because we as Black media are actually and essentially a counter voice, a counter threat, a counter voice, a counter force to mainstream media's centuries old media apparatus. That's a hell of a position to be in, to be one of the few lone voices to actually penetrate the ecosystem so that we're able to give you true information and commentary that matters to you. So, of course, the powers that shouldn't be don't necessarily like the fact that we're here doing that. It's important that we have these types of discussions concerning what's really going on in politics because folks want us to be caught up in an illusion, in something that's superficial and not something that's actually tangible. This is why it's so important, and the reason why they don't really appreciate voices like ours, the establishment that is, because we're demanding not that just you acknowledge racism or white supremacy, not just you giving a nod to some of our difficulties over the many centuries in this country. It's the fact that when we demand that you do something about it is when they have a problem. And when it comes down to the political parties, that's where we see no distinction. So when we give the Democrat Party, and I should speak for myself, when I give the Democrat Party this everlasting word, it is based on the fact that we're actually giving you something, our vote, giving you the power to change our condition, and you aren't doing it. That makes you a worse enemy than the other side because we're actually giving you power to do something and you're just playing in our face, and that dog don't hunt anymore. How many of you all know that Black Americans in the United States have overwhelmingly supported the Democrat Party now for nearly 60 some years? Something has got to change, and we don't owe you nothing. Family, I have been discussing the Black farmers here in the United States and the billions and billions of dollars that we've owed them for generations of racism and discrimination. And we have failed to do anything about it after all of these many decades and a couple of different generations that have passed since. Well, the current Democrat regime, the authoritarian Democrat Party, are responsible as well. Just a few months ago, and even before that a bit, but specifically even as recently, I should say as a few months ago, I should put it that way, Mr. John Boyd, he is the president of the Black Farmers Association, talked about the fact that they're so disenchanted with the Biden administration, they was refusing to even vote for the Democrats. They said that explicitly. And they're going to be open even to Donald Trump in terms of saying stuff like, what have you done for me? Meaning they're going to be open to either side. It's not because they love Donald Trump. It's because we don't see the Democrat Party or the Republican Party any different. Our votes are for sale. We're going for whoever does the most for Black Americans. Do you understand? We're not trying to look deep into your heart about where you stand on stuff, because both of you all have a problem with us. So whatever the tangible benefits we can derive most from either party, that's the party, in my opinion, that makes the most sense. I want you to watch something that just recently took place just over the past days. Watch this clip.
This is a very, very historic payout for Black farmers, and I see it as a huge win for myself and the National Black Farmers Association that worked on this for nearly 4 decades. So basically, 60,000 applications were turned in, 45,000 Black farmers and other farmers of color have begun receiving checks this week and the latter part of last week. So it's very, very good news, and a total of $2 billion. So we've been waiting for this payout for a long time. And the MBFA went out and held 60 meetings, Amy, in FaceTime with our members. We sent out 130,000 postcards in the mail to all of our members, telling them how to apply for this. It took us, Amy, on average 3 to 3.5 hours to help each and every Black farmer fill out this 40-page application. So it was a very extensive process. And so we were glad to get the news that from Stephen Benjamin at the White House actually called me and told me that the checks were actually going out to farmers around the country. So we see this as...
Somebody say, voila. Somebody say, just like magic. What you just witnessed there was the voice of our brother, Mr. Boyd, who's the president of this Black Farmers Association, excited about the fact that under this Democrat regime, they just released $2 billion of several other billions of dollars that they're owed, at least another $5 billion they're owed. Of course, they're owed way more than that, but at least another $5 billion that has to do directly with their actual land was just released, just in time for the presidential election. Now, this article that I'm reading from by Taylor Penley, this headline says, Georgia Black farmers disenchanted with Biden consider supporting Trump. Quote, what have you done for me? Black farmers in the Peach State are becoming increasingly disillusioned with President Biden, according to a recent New York Times report, and losing the small voting bloc could spell further bad news for Democrats come November. President Trump, I'm quoting, he did something for us while he was in office. President Biden, what have you done for us, John Slaughter, a 39-year-old farmer from Georgia, told the outlet. Slaughter is among a number of Black farmers who have pivoted toward the former president as unique struggles persist for the demographic. In his own stance, it goes on to talk about Donald Trump and some of the others in this particular piece. This is interesting, family, because that piece I just read from was just from a few weeks ago, and another piece prior to that I was reading to my audience was from a few months ago, where it talks about how how the Black Democrats have cooled on the Democrat Party and Joe Biden because they have refused under the Democrat Party to issue checks that are due to them. Well, guess what just happened, family? At the time that you're viewing this broadcast, which I'm not sure exactly when it will air, but it's ABC News report from July 31st, just a few days from the date that I'm recording, says Black and other minority farmers are getting $2 billion from the USDA after years of discrimination. The Biden administration has doled out more than $2 billion in direct payments for Black and other minority farmers discriminated against by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. More than 23,000 farmers were approved for payments ranging from $10,000 to $500,000, according to the USDA. Another 20,000 who planned to start a farm but did not receive a USDA loan received between $3,500 and $6,000. Most payments went to farmers in Mississippi and Alabama. USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack told reporters that the aid is not compensation for anyone's loss or the pain endured, but it's an acknowledgement by the department. Family, I want you to watch this next clip.
Now, this financial assistance is not compensation for anyone's loss or the pain endured, but it is an acknowledgement by the department. And our hope is, and the President's hope is, that this financial assistance will help many farmers stay on the farm, contribute to our nation's food supply, and continue to do what they love.
Okay, family, in that clip, did you see US?
Okay, let me stop it for just a few minutes and I'm going to start back up in a bit because this is very dear to my heart about these farmers because my ancestors were farmers. My grandfather, my mother's father, who was a farmer, had to run for his life. And I mean, I'm speaking literally because they have shared with us down through the years the struggle that they had. And again, I am Louise Hicks, your host of this podcast, Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. And I'm sharing this because, like I said, it's dear to me because I recall my grandmother telling us about how my grandfather had to run for his life because he was a farmer and he wanted to make sure he got some profits from his farming. And he was an exceptional farmer. He knew his business as a farmer. And he had to run for his life because he wanted to keep some of his profits. And these white people wanted to take it all. Didn't want him to have anything but just barely enough for he and his family to get by. My mother and her siblings and my grandmother. This was the greed of America that Kamalaharris, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, and others said this is not a racist country. And you can't to give $2 billion, and it's not all going to Black farmers. It said other minorities. Other minorities did not build this country. Our ancestors built this country through all the atrocities. So this man, to say what he's saying, it's a disgrace. What has happened in this country to Black people is a disgrace. The Constitution says we, and it still says it to this date, 3/5 of a person. We're not even whole human beings. So this is a disgrace. And like I said, my grandfather had to run for his life. And we're talking modern day. We're talking in the 50s, the 40s, and 50s when he was farming. And I'm going to give you a little stats quickly, and then I'll give more. Like I said, I'm Louise Hicks, your host of this podcast, Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. Please share. Subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to the channel that you see in Vickidillard, who is giving you information because she gives a lot of factual information. And I have done some due diligence research because that's what I do. So please give it a like, thumbs up, leave your comments, because I'm sure your ancestors have shared some of the same things that we are talking about and discussing here. And let me ask you something. Did you know that in 1920, there were 925,708 Black farmers? I will repeat that, 925,708 Black farmers, not even a million. By 2022, there were 32,700 Black farmers. This is 2022. And because of the white supremacists, the racism in this country, look what happened to all of those Black farmers, our ancestors. Between 1920 and 2022, What a great loss, a huge loss of 893,008 Black farmers lost their farms between 1920 and 2022 because of racism. Nothing but racism. And guess who was in control most of those years? Democrats. Both houses, both congressional, both Congresses, both congressional leaderships, the House and the Senate were in charge from about 14 years, 1931 to 1947, mostly under President Roosevelt or Roosevelt, however you want to pronounce it, and however they pronounce it, Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. And then came the Democrats again under President Lyndon Johnson. And you're going to hear more about that in part 2. And in between those years were both parties in control. But most of this time, the House, the Senate, the President were all in charge, while our Black farmers, our ancestors, were sabotaged because they did not want to see Black people elevate themselves. And that's a fact, because the Black people that were able to elevate themselves, the Black towns, were destroyed with our government's help. Tulsa, many others. Go and do your own due diligent research. These towns are underwater now. Black people were thriving, minding their own business, but because of jealousy and racism. And my grandfather was one of them. And it's sickening and it's sick. And we are sick and tired of being sick and tired as Black people. That's why Black media is so important. And all of this food talk, as my grandmother would call it, we got to stop listening to it. We got to stop listening to these celebrities. They have their money. They are laughing at the Black folks collectively that are struggling. They're laughing all the way to the bank, because they are living high on the hog, and they are telling you what to do when we don't need them to tell us what to do, because we are intelligent Black people. And I am a baby boomer. I've lived a lot of this stuff. I'm not telling you what I've read, what I've heard. I've lived a lot of it. I'm 73 years of age. I've lived it. I've seen a lot of it as a child. So we have to wake up, and we got to stop being delusional. And we got to make sure we are getting the tangibles to build, empower ourselves, collectively come together, unify, and stop listening to these celebrities. And for them who are out here pandering for the Democrats, and I mention the Democrats more than Republicans because we've been voting for them for decades. And why are we out here speaking the way we're speaking now if the Democrats have been doing the righteous minded thing toward empowering Black people with resources, well-needed resources? One last thing, because I'm going to share some of this in the part 2 of this. In 1920, did you know that there were 5,498,454 white farmers? I will repeat that. 5,498,454 white farmers. But you didn't even have 1 million Black farmers who built this country because of racism, white supremacists. So let's get back and let's listen to some more of what Vicky has to say in part one of what I'm bringing to you on Black farmers' huge losses, political sabotage, mostly done by the Democratic Party. So let's listen to some more of what Vicky has to say.
Secretary Tom Vilsack explained the fact that they've just now cut these checks and how this is not even all the money that they're really due, but this is an acknowledgement for the difficulty of these Black farmers. When we tell you that when Black folks decide that we're not going to vote for you, it forces the Democrats to get some act right. It works. That's exactly what the farmers did. Mr. John Boyd, he was the one that you saw in the original clip. He came out publicly and told the Democrats, we're not voting for you. He came out publicly and told Biden, we're not voting for you until y'all cut our checks. Now, for all of you Black Democrat shields that say that we have to jump through all these red hoops and we don't understand how Congress works, we don't understand how the government works, guess what? Nothing changed over the past few months from between when the Black farmers said earlier this year, we're not voting for you, Biden, or the Democrats, till a few months later, until just now. There's no new Congress that's there. There's no new president yet. But they waited all the way up to this late date, the Democrats, knowing full well that they were possibly losing homes, being evicted, equipment messed up. Can you imagine the children that they weren't able to send to college? Can you imagine the employees that they had to let go because they didn't have the money that they needed? Can you imagine the other economic financial hardships that they faced while the Democrats played with the money that they've been due for generations? I'm happy they got the money, but I'm trying to show you that it's always been a game with these devils. In the book that I love to read from, entitled How White Folks Got So Rich, there is a section that specifically is labeled Farmers Home Administration, the FHA. This is dealing with the exact same issue. And it also discusses the Farmers Home Administration, the FHA, the exact same department that we're dealing with right now. How many of you all know, listen to this on page 73, it says that despite the reality, the Farmers Home Administration, the FHA, was set up in 1930 to give loans and subsidies to white farmers to sustain and maintain their operations. To achieve this unstated racist purpose, the FHA allowed local whites to operate the program, and they, not the federal government, decided who would get those critical benefits. Family, the book gives great details about how Black-owned farms, unable to compete with the well-subsidized and well-financed white farmers, fell dramatically from almost 1,900,000 in 1930 to 682,000 in 1939, and family, today, way less than that, hardly a drop in the bucket. In 1964, it says, by 1964, a study found that every program administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture was rife with racial discrimination. The federal loans from the USDA were used by local white administrators to retaliate against Black farmers for their support of civil rights efforts or for simply voting or attempting to vote. I want to read you an excerpt from Dr. Martin Luther King, and I'm going to leave it at that. In 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King spoke at a rural Mississippi church and put land front and center. Watch this quote. I'm reading a quote, a direct quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, 1968, about Black farmers. At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land through get our check, end quote, from Dr. Martin Luther King, 1968. How many of you all saw my recent reparation speech that I did in Washington, D.C. just a few weeks ago? Shout out to Brother Phil Scott. He permitted us to play my 20-minute speech here on the platform. If you haven't seen it, be sure to go under the video so that you can watch my 20-minute speech that I just recently gave here in the United States, in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. over reparations. Dr. King told them in 1968 that the purpose of us going to Washington, D.C. was to get our check. And shortly right after that, they took him out. Who is they? The United States. Did you see what he specifically said about how they gave all of the land, the resources, to teach white folks how to farm, give them the land to farm, gave them county agents to farm, low interest rates for those that needed loans. And it's the same issue that we've got today. And the Democrats are playing politics today with the black farmers. I just wanted you to share. I wanted to share this powerful information with you. I can't wait to hear what you have to say below. Beloved, people are always asking me, Vicky, how do you always have an intuitive sense about what's going on in the world? Beloved, it's because I'm tapped into the supernatural. I brag about stuff that I don't know because I'm tapped into a divine spiritual order, a spiritual council. If you want to know how to do that, join my supernatural spiritual monthly mastermind school at vickidillard.com. It's called the Vicky Dillard Mystery School. Go to my website at vickidillard.com. That's vickidillard.com, VICKI planet.com. Your life will never be the same. And of course, share the broadcast here from African Diaspora News Channel. I can't wait to see you.
Thank you, Vicky. So let's stop sharing. And I have something else I want to share with you. Give me a minute here, and then I'm going to elaborate a little more. So let's share again. Now, everything Vicky says, I agree with, because, like I said, I'm Louise Hicks, your host of Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. And this is part one of Black Farmers' Huge Losses, Political Sabotage. And she labels it $2 billion as ransom. For years, decades after decade, Black farmers have billions of dollars of loss. It has been forecast that it's about $120 billion of losses to Black farmers. And it makes sense because 1920, there wasn't even 1 million Black farmers, and they had only about 16 million acres of land, only about 16 million, just a drop in the bucket. And by 2017, that 16 million of farmland had dropped to 2.9 million acres, from 16 million acres in 1910 with less than 1 million farmers, 925,708 as I spoke with you. By 2022, 32,700 Black farmers. In 1910, with 16 million acres of land, and by 2017, only 2.9 acres of land. So what does that tell you? That's political sabotage on both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. However, more on the Democrats, because for 14 years, the Democrats held the president and the House and the Senate. For 14 years, 1930, 1931, 1931, 33, 1933 to 1947. And these Black people, they had this land in 1910. And look what happened by 2017. And I got it right here. In 1910, and this is from the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. In 1910, Black farmers owned 16 million acres of USA farmland, only 1.8%. In 1920, USDA records indicate, as I mentioned, 925,708 Black farm operators, only 14% of US farmers. In 2017, Black farmers owned 2.9 million acres, from 16 million in 1910 to 2017, 2.9 million acres, not even a percentage of USA farmland, a 0.32%. And by 2022, only 32,700 Black farm operators, and they added ranch operators. So that's a combination. Only 1.24% of Black farmers. $2 billion. when it's shared with other minorities? Think about it. And this was done by Democrats, mostly because they were in charge. Go and pull your own statistics, do the research, pull who was in charge during these years, all of these years. And I have another one I'd like to read to you. As I mentioned, there were 5.5 million 5,498,454 white farmers in 1920 because land was given to them and taken away from Black farmers. Resources were given. So we got to do our due diligence research and think about it. I'm not telling anybody who to vote for, whether you vote or not. However, we must become active. If we want to empower ourselves, we must. And I'm a baby boomer. I'm 73 years of age, but I've seen a lot. I'm not, someone said in one of my podcasts, you're not like the average baby boomers because a lot of the Gen Xers, Gen Zs, the millennials, they see us as laid back, don't care, doing nothing. The baby boomers, Black baby boomers, I'm speaking of. But we have to realize we have children that are Gen Zs, millennials, Gen Xers who have children, and some of their children have children. We got to think about our offsprings, and we got to collectively come together and unify. And think about Fannie Lou Hamer, who died to vote for getting what Black people are owed. Taking some action to force, look what these farmers did. And just think if all of us got together as John Boyd did. Look what he did. John Boyd, the president of the Black Farmers Association. Just think if all of us collectively got together and put some demands on these politicians. We don't demand anything, you don't get anything. That's what happened under the Obama administration. What did he do about the farmers? Did they threaten him? So these Black farmers were not playing, they're not playing. And when you think about it, maybe they should make the Democrats wait all of these years. Make them wait. Why vote for them now? Because there is $2 billion as ransom for the Democratic vote. And this is not even $2 billion that's going to the small minority of farmers that are left, that are Black farmers that are left, which is little over 32,000 out of almost 1,900,000 and some thousand back in 1920. So that's something for you to think about when you have all the resources that could have gone to keep these almost 1,000,000. They should have grown. And I had a brother who passed away that was a farmer. He couldn't get any resources, but he did his best to raise crops, and they were exceptional crops that he was selling to the small community in Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana. So we got to really think about that vote. And this is probably the most significant vote that Black people are involved in. And look at the record of the Democrats. And let me share with you this quick article. The number of farmers by color and tenure, 1920 and 1910. Of the 5,498,454 white farm operators in 1920, 581,068 or 9% were foreign born, as compared with 10.5% in 1910. Think about that. Foreign born. And you can equate that with what's going on now with the Biden-Harris administration allowing all of these illegal migrants who are taking over the Black communities. They are being given millions, maybe even into the billions of dollars. And their ancestors have not had any of the atrocities, the rapes, the hangings, the just all kinds of atrocities done to our ancestors during slavery. And after, as I said about my grandfather, who had to run for his life because he was a farmer and he wanted some of his profits. We're talking the 1940s and 50s. Before I was born, and I'm 73, born in 1951. So we're talking modern day. And these farmers, here we are, 2024, and the Biden administration is part of that sabotage, the political sabotage. And all of this $2 billion is definitely not going, because they said it's for other minorities as well. And you only have a handful of Black farmers left. So think about how much money the Black farmers will be getting when it's divided between them and other minorities whose ancestors did not shed any blood and tears during chattel slavery to build this country. So when you get to the voting booth, or if you choose to be the couch, think about it. Just give it some thought, what the Democrats have not done to empower Black people, except symbolism, giving you a holiday. You can't eat that holiday. In fact, some of you probably spend more money than you should on that holiday. I don't. And we have to really be realistic. Come together, unify, and stop listening to these celebrities, because they mean you no good. They are out to put money in their pocket. Just think about how you're living and think about how they're living. They have all the homes, they have all these cars they buy. They're very materialistic. And they don't come together and build like other ethnicities are doing. We don't have decent grocery stores. We don't have decent medical facilities. We don't have decent educational institutions. Our children need to be taught by us, because they're trying their best to sabotage the historical facts of slavery, chattel slavery, here in the United States. We don't have distribution centers, financial institutions, which is vital for empowerment of our people. So we really need to give it some thought. And for baby boomers like myself who are out here, you're quiet, you're not saying anything, you're not doing anything. All I can ask you is to think about your offsprings, your generations to come, because we know that we are suffering from generational trauma. Go and read the Willie Lynch letter and the making of a slave. And they have done a job on some of us. Read Dr. Joy DeGruy's book about the post-traumatic slave syndrome, PTSS. We got to do some reading, and we got to do some waking up. We can no longer sit back and just dream about it. We have to be actionable about it. And again, I'm Louise Hicks, your host of this podcast, Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. Please subscribe to my channel, share, and share, because we have to educate one another. There's a saying that we must sharpen one another's tools, and that is so important for us to do. We have to sharpen one another's tools, and that's biblical. Biblical. And we that are professing to be Christians, it says in Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And that's what we need to be doing. So thank you, Vicki, for sharpening the tools that are necessary within our Black community. And part 2, I have Tim Black, who is going to continue to sharpen the tools. And I always talk to you and tell you about 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power. And you notice power is first. Power, love, and a sound mind. So let's start exercising that sound mind so that we can have the power and the love among us as Black folks and unify to make a difference within our own community, because it's up to us. It is up to us. Do what the farmers did. Come together. Put some demands out there. You see what happened? And again, Louise Hicks, stay tuned for part 2. Please share, share, share. Leave your comments, thumbs up. Please give your like. And I always tell you, your power lies within you. Let it loose, because your destiny is your command. And thank you to all of my new subscribers. Thank you to everyone that listens to my podcast. Please share it, and share it. And much love until part 2 coming up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Much, much, much love.